Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we are going to be talking about a fantastic book and a fantastic property and a fantastic character. It's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe #1. Let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in September of 2012 by Detective Comics, most of you probably already know that He-Man has been around since the early 80s, and that this is by far not the first He-Man comic to ever exist. However, it is a fantastic series that I highly recommend. I do own the entire series, and will be going through all of it at some point or another. But what I like most about the Masters of the Universe as a whole is that its history has always been linked to comic books, because when the Masters of the Universe toy line was first released, it was still illegal to build a cartoon from a toy line, and they needed a way to explain the lore of He-Man and the history of Eternia and the overall premise of the plot to the toy line. And they did so by releasing mini comics with all of the figures and many of the play sets and vehicles. If you've never read any of these mini comics, I highly recommend doing so. They're very dated for sure, but they're still a really fun read, and you might be thinking to yourself that they're hard to come by. And if you're looking to purchase them in single issues, you're correct. They're not easy to find. However, there is a very good solution to that problem. And that solution comes in the form of this hardback book, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe mini comic collection. If you're a fan of He-Man, if you grew up in the 80s or the 90s or the early 2000s, because this covers all of it, I cannot recommend this book enough. It's fantastic. It's got interviews done with some of the artists who worked on the books, notes from people who helped create the entirety of the story and who helped create the toy line. It's a really fun read. It's a very thick book, well over 1,000 pages, and it really gives a lot of great insight as to where He-Man started and how it evolved throughout the years. Do yourself a favor, if you see this book and if you have any type of enjoyment from the Masters of the Universe property, pick this thing up. You will not regret it. It's a fantastic read. So, because this is a DC published book, the inside cover starts us off with an advertisement for the book series The Beyonders. I've never read this series and know nothing about it, but if you have, let me know what it was about in the comments section. I'd like to know if it was any good. On the very first page, we see the credits down here in the lower left-hand corner. We have writer James Robinson, penciler Philip Tan, inker Roy Jose and LeBeau Underwood, colorist Richard and Tanya Ori, and also Carrie Strachan, letterer Carlos M. Mengal, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, cover Philip Tan and Dave Wilkins, assistant editor Sarah Litt, and editor Kwanzaa Johnson. That seems like way more people than was actually necessary to get this book out on time. Now, here on the first page, we see a very nice, very detailed full-page splash artwork by Philip Tan of He-Man. He's jumping straight at us, the reader, with the Sword of Power and also a battle axe. If you've ever purchased a base He-Man figure in the last 40 years, it will most likely have come with both the Sword of Power and a battle axe. And the battle axe may seem as if it didn't make any sense, considering there's not many depictions of He-Man in any of the animated series using the axe. But the reason that it comes with the axe is because in the original storybooks that Mattel published in the early 80s prior to the release of the toy line, the story was completely different. Prince Adam was not a character. He-Man just existed as a warrior who lived in the jungles of Eternia and went on a quest to protect Castle Grayskull. Along the way, he saved the sorceress from a monster. She rewarded him by giving him the armor that he wears and also a battle axe to use as a weapon. And the Sword of Power, while it did exist, was not linked to He-Man directly or shown to be a way that he was able to access his powers. In fact, the armor that she gave him is noted as being an amplifier to his strength and giving him superhuman abilities. The whole transformation and getting the powers of He-Man through the sword was a story element that came later on, and basically all of the things from that original series of storybooks was retconned. However, they decided to keep the battle axe as part of the figure, and it's always packaged as an accessory to the toy. Here on the next page, we get a really cool 2-page splash image of Adam's dream sequence where he is He-Man fighting with the other Masters of the Universe against Skeletor and his evil minions. We see a lot of the different characters, and Adam remembers that in his dream there were many battles, but good always triumphed over evil. And I'd like to take this time to point out that this is kind of my problem with Philip Tan as an artist. He's actually quite talented and can in fact draw very detailed works. Unfortunately, when he's pressed for time, he cuts corners. As we can see on this page, the level of detail is severely lacking when compared to the previous page. As we can see, Man-at-Arms armor has very little intricate detail to it. Stratos, really none at all. Trapjaw's face is basically just scribbled. There's no feather detail to the sorceress's cloak. It's really kind of unfortunate. I mean, even Teela, despite the fact that she's very close in the foreground, you can see her sword is not very detailed at all, nor is her armor. She has very little line detail on her skin. It's really sad that Philip Tan unfortunately takes these shortcuts because he is capable of much better than this. Here on the next page, we see that Adam has awoken from his dream and is now back in his humble life as a woodsman in the forests of Eternia. He's, just living his life, really has no real direction, just going out every day, chopping down trees, chopping them up for firewood. However, we notice that his cabin is situated in the shadows of Snake Mountain, which is a little bit of an ominous and foreboding little thing going on here in the background. And then we see the falcon flying through the forest all alone for some reason. And then on the next page, we get an advertisement for 5 Gum, which I'm not even sure if they still make 5 Gum. They maybe do. Still, what the hell was Wrigley's even thinking when they made this stuff? I don't know if you were alive or remember these commercials, but if you've never seen them, look them up. They're nonsensical and have nothing to do with chewing gum. And even if they did, was anyone really complaining about Doublemint or Wrigley's Spearmint or Juicy Fruit? I don't recall hearing anyone being upset about those gums. Why did Wrigley's have to reinvent the wheel? And also, what flavor is this gum? Mint? No. Cobalt. What does cobalt even taste like? Nobody knows. It's irritating, man. Just stay in your lane, Wrigley's. You were already doing it right. Here on the next page, we see Adam continuing to fell trees when he hears a call from the cabin from his father. Adam believes that his father has become senile in his old age, as his father asks to be fed from the good china, and that Adam just kind of humors him and tells him that he's brought in the best china in the kingdom from the royal kitchen. However, there might be more going on, as this is really more of a foreshadowing of things to come, as the things that Adam seems to believe are real may not be. And on the next page after that, we get an advertisement for the brand new show Comedy Bang Bang on IFC. I had completely forgotten that Comedy Bang Bang started in 2012. However, I never actually watched the show, so that's probably why. On the next page, we see Adam has gone back to work after feeding his father, continuing to chop down trees and process them for firewood, as he ponders his life and wonders if he is doing the right thing and kind of wishes he had some sort of direction or guidance when his work is interrupted by none other than the Falcon. And Adam turns, sees it, says hello. The Falcon then quickly flies away off into the distance. And on the next page, we get an advertisement for the Maddie Collector Club, which was cool if you had enough money to do it. For the 30th anniversary of Masters of the Universe, the Maddie Collector Club released a revamped line of the Masters of the Universe action figures, which were done in the same style as the original figures from the 80s, but were far more detailed, had far more points of articulation, and just overall a higher quality collector toy. And it was super cool, except that the Collector Club operated as a subscription-based service, so you couldn't just get online and buy them one at a time or just purchase the figures you wanted. You had to subscribe to the service and purchase every figure that came out, which was really annoying if you were like me at that time and didn't have that kind of disposable income to put into something like this. But if you had the money, I'm sure it was super cool. On the next page, Adam goes back to his cabin to sleep for the night, and then when he comes out to work the next day, he is greeted by the Falcon once again. He decides to try and befriend the bird and offers it some meat if it'll land on his arm, which the bird does, and then Adam realizes clear as day that he knows the name of this bird, which is Zora. As he lets the bird fly away once again, he wonders where the bird is flying to. We're then teleported to a dream where Adam is once again the embodiment of He-Man, but this time he sees Castle Grayskull and the Sorceress and also the Falcon and Skeletor in his vision, and he suddenly awakens and realizes what he must do. And then we see him packing up to leave on a journey as he thanks one of the neighbors for caring for his father while he's away. She questions why he's leaving his home in the forest, and he responds saying that while the forest is his home, that he's filled with a need that he doesn't quite understand. And once again, I'd like to point out, this is where we kind of see some of the weirdness of Philip Tan, where the background here of Castle Grayskull and Skeletor is highly detailed. However, He-Man, who is in the foreground, much closer to us, is less detailed, and the Sorceress and Zora, the Falcon, are in the middle ground and are really poorly detailed. It's an odd way to go about drawing this kind of stuff, and I don't know if Philip Tan was pressed for time or if it was his goal to have the background be far more detailed than the characters in the foreground, but artistically it really doesn't make sense. Here on the next page, we get a 2-page advertisement for all of the upcoming DC Comics, which I don't even know why they list it as DC Comics. The DC stands for Detective Comics, so they're writing it as Detective Comics Comics. Sure, whatever. But it's got a schedule for all of the upcoming graphic novels, aka trade papers, that are going to be coming out from the months of May all the way through to the months of November, and the schedule on which you can expect each title to get its graphic novel release. Usually these would have contained the first 5 or 6 issues of each one of these series. I don't own any, so I can't tell you how many issues were in each one of these collected editions, but typically that's what it would have been, and it is kind of cool that they showed an entire release schedule. Although I do find it funny that by the time this book was published in September, half of this list had already come out and was just unnecessary in this advertisement. On the next page, we see Adam starting on the first few steps of his adventure as he ventures off into the forest with Zora flying above. He casually moves through the forest, unaware that he is being watched by someone who's up to no good as he jumps over a log and a rock and is suddenly confronted by none other than Beastman, who says, "You're getting quite far from home, Adam, don't you think? If I was you, I'd turn around." And we get this really awesome, super detailed image of Beastman coming out of the forest, grinding his nails and claws across this tree trunk. It looks really good. It's fantastic. It's highly detailed. And don't get used to it, because it's the last time you're going to see this good of a drawing of Beastman in this comic. Thanks, Phil. On the next page, we see that Adam is visibly and understandably distraught and terrified at this giant monster man that's in front of him. He quickly pleads that he must be mistaken and is looking for a different Adam, that he's just a woodsman, but Beastman replies that he'll just be dead when he's finished with him. Adam quickly jumps out of the way as Beastman attacks, but falls backwards onto the ground. Beastman claims that Adam's trying to make this difficult for him, but Adam pleads no, he isn't, and then decides to just turn and run for his life. We see here on the next page, Adam quickly jumps and then slides down a hill as Beastman quickly goes after him. Adam realizes that he's going to have to use his skills as a woodsman if he wants to survive. He quickly thrusts his axe blade into a tree to make a quick turnaround to go to the opposite direction. This, of course, makes Beastman miss. Beastman quickly grabs into the ground to try and change course. Adam realizes that he's actually quite surprised himself about how good he is at evading the attacks of this monster. Here on the next page, we get a 2-page advertisement for the New 52 mini busts. We see a selection of them here. We have Superman, Grifter, Wonder Woman, Batgirl, and Cyborg. These were really nice little mini bust. Full disclosure, I have the Grifter mini bust because, as far as I know, it's the only mini bust / statue of any kind that exists of Grifter, and I definitely wanted to own it because, despite the fact that I'm not a huge fan of Wildcats, Grifter is still awesome and one of my favorite characters from the early days of Image, and there was no way I was going to pass on what might be my only chance to own a Grifter statue of any kind. But I really did enjoy these. These were really well-made little statues. All of them had the exact same base, but with a different insignia that corresponded to their character. If you ever see one of these and, it's of a character you're like, don't hesitate to pick it up. They're really well-made and they're super detailed. Here on the next page, we see that Adam kicks off of a large rock to charge towards Beastman. Beastman is angry, of course, that Adam's making this difficult for him, and the two of them clash. Beastman is able to claw Adam's arm, but Adam is also able to cut Beastman's chest with his axe. This surprises Beastman as he's visibly in pain. Adam's also hurt and realizes that he's been cut, but he's also surprised that he was able to do such damage to Beastman. Beastman, now enraged, decides to once again give chase to Adam as we see Zora flying overhead, who appears to be telepathically communicating with Adam, telling him to control his fear and that his own self-doubt is actually more dangerous to him than Beastman is. Adam decides to once again turn and face Beastman head on, and to focus his rage and anger and use his skill with the wood and the axe. Here on the next page, we see an advertisement for San Diego Comic-Con, which is pretty cool, except for the fact that this book was published in September and San Diego Comic-Con happened in July and had been over for 2 months by the time that this book hit the shelves. Way to go, DC. Here on the next page, we see Adam throw his axe as it spins through the air and cuts tree limbs in half. Beastman dodges it quickly. Adam runs forward. Beastman, basically just taunting Adam, saying that he's a fool, that he missed. And Adam correcting him and saying that he's the one who's the fool because Adam wasn't aiming for Beastman in the first place. He was aiming for the tree limbs that he cut. And then we see on the next page that Adam dodges Beastman's attack once again and then proceeds to stab him directly in the back with the jagged tree limb that he just cut. This, of course, causes horrific pain. Beastman is staggered from this attack. He's bleeding from his back, bleeding out of his mouth. He's roaring. Adam, however, wastes no time in pressing his own attack as he comes back and hits Beastman with a huge right cross, running as he does so, knocking Beastman out cold and realizing that he's defeated this monster man. And then he also basically thanks Zora and says that she helped a lot. And then proceeds to ponder once again, though, how this creature knew who he was and knew where to find him. On the next page, we see an advertisement for Batman Earth 1 graphic novel, which hits shelves in July of 2012, 2 months before this book was released. I don't know why DC would have wasted this page on advertising a graphic novel that was already in stores when they could have instead used it to advertise a graphic novel that would be coming out in the future. But then again, I don't work for the advertising side of DC, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. On the final page of the story, we see Adam wandering into the desert, following Zora, telling her to lead the way, but also pondering why it was that Beastman didn't want him to venture from the forest. But then we see on the bottom of the page that it's because of Skeletor, and it was his will to make sure that Adam never left the forest because he doesn't want him to discover the truth of what's been happening. He then tells Beastman to go and tell all the others to stop Adam at any cost, even if it means killing him. And once again, this is following the complaints that I've had throughout a lot of this issue. We see that this close-up picture of Skeletor's face is highly detailed. It looks really cool. However, this image of Skeletor sitting on his throne with Beastman down on the ground in front of him groveling is really kind of lackluster, not very detailed, just seems kind of rushed. And again, it's not that great when compared to the image that's literally right next to it. Here on the next page, we get a 2-page ad for the New 52 number 0 issues that were going to be coming out later in September. This would be presenting issue number 0 for all of the comics involved in the New 52, which had just started in 2012. And, at this point in time, DC was very, very heavily promoting and all in on the New 52. Unfortunately, this would not last, and they would forego the New 52 in favor of Rebirth. What the hell were you thinking, DC? On the last page of the book, we get a, not so much advertisement, but just a showing of DC Comics All Access. Once again, the comics part is unnecessary. That happened in New York City during Fleet Week when all of the naval officers are coming into the city, and DC opened up their doors to give them a tour of their headquarters and handed out free comic books. Really cool to do for the men and women of our armed forces. That was really nice of them. And on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for the WarnerArchive.com website where you can order rare TV shows and movies on DVD. I have a feeling that there's a good possibility that this service doesn't exist anymore. I have not checked, but it would not surprise me in the least if this website is now defunct and there is no way to directly order DVDs, or in this case, I guess it would be Blu-rays at this point, directly from Warner Brothers on that website for your viewing enjoyment, because we now have readily available streaming services at our disposal. And that was He-Man and the Masters of the Universe #1. This is a fantastic book. It's a fantastic title all the way around. It's one continuing narrative, and it's written so well. The twists and the turns and the directions that they take the story in, the way that they present characters, the way that they change characters throughout this series, it's just overall fantastic, which only makes it more disappointing that frequently the artwork does not match the quality of the story. I know I've been really critical of Philip Tan in today's episode, and I don't want that to come across that I think he's a bad artist, because I don't. Philip Tan is not a bad artist at all. He's actually pretty good. It's just that, like I stated before, his artwork and the quality of it is not always the same on every page. He very frequently cuts corners when he's up against a deadline, or maybe his heart just isn't in the work, but you could clearly see one page being highly detailed and then the next page being just kind of slapdash in its presentation, for lack of a better term. And there are some decent artists that get put on this book, but then there's also some not so great artists that get put on this book as well. And I understand why. This is Masters of the Universe, not Justice League, which, by the way, at the beginning of the New 52, the Justice League was being drawn by none other than Jim Lee, and Batman was being drawn by Greg Capullo. Once again, these are premier titles in the DC lineup, whereas Masters of the Universe was not. And despite being launched with the rest of the New 52, it only has very minimal tie-in with the New 52 as a whole. It's basically one little crossover miniseries that happens, which I have and we will go over in these videos at some point. But outside of that, it kind of just exists as its own unique story and independent narrative that has nothing to do with the rest of the DC universe at this time. So, unfortunately, DC kind of treated it like a bit of an afterthought, or at least that's the way I saw it. But those are just my opinions. Your opinions might be different, and maybe you really like some of the artists that were put on this title. But, whatever you think, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for watching. Have a great day.